Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 731, and today is December 20th, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. All right, so this is the week before Christmas, so I just want to give you all a quick preview for next week's show. I will have an episode of Conflicts of Interest out on Monday, shooting for an episode of the Kyle Anzalone show on Tuesday, and then likely not another new episode until Friday. I was going to take off probably Christmas and the day after, just to enjoy some time with family, my new daughter, and all that. At the same time, I was going to release at least one, but probably two episodes of the Kyle Anzalone show as an audio only podcast on Christmas and the day after. So there will be something in your conflict of interest podcast feed if you consume the show that way. Trying to get everybody on board with the Kyle Anzalone show here, all signed up and subscribed over at the YouTube channel. So if you haven't done so already, head on over and subscribe to that channel. I really appreciate it. We have a new episode out this week of the Kyle Anzalone show. All right, let's get into the news today. First up here, this one from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. Uhuru members will face no prison time over bogus foreign agent allegations. So a district judge ruled on Monday that 3 members of the Florida-based Uhuru movement will face prohibition but no jail time for being found guilty of conspiring to act as a foreign agent of Russia, a conviction that came as a result of the group being targeted by the federal government for their political views. So the founder of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement and 2 others of the group were combined known as the Uhuru Three, were indicted by the U.S. Justice Department over their contacts with the Russian NGO, the Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia. So the allegation was that the AGMR was recruiting Americans to spread Russian propaganda on behalf of Russian intelligence. The Department of Justice targeted the Uhuru Three by using foreign agents laws, claiming they failed to register while acting as agents of the Russian government. So the leader and the members denied that they were acting as Russian agents and said they were clearly being targeted for their political speech. The Uhuru Three denounced U.S. involvement in Ukraine and expressed support for Russia, but the group has spoken out against U.S. foreign policy since it was founded in 1972. It has the long history of working with other groups around the world. In September, a judge ruled that the Uhuru Three were not guilty of failing to register as foreign agents, but found them guilty as conspiring to act as foreign agents without notifying the Attorney General. Prosecutors were still seeking prison time for the Uhuru Three, but District Judge William Young sentenced them to 3 years of probation, and 300 hours of community service. If the requirement to register as a foreign agent, everything in the indictment would be legal and prosecuted speech, Young said. The Uhuru Three could have faced up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. So the leader of the Uhuru Three said, if you listen to what the judge had to say, he said that what our lawyers have been saying all along, our lawyers have said that we shouldn't be here. Our lawyers have said that even if this thing goes to trial, it's an assault, a major assault on the First Amendment. So according to a defense campaign for the Uhuru Three, the group will appeal the conspiracy conviction and will work to oppose foreign agent laws. It said it is a precedent-setting case, the first time a foreign agent law has ever been used to target pure political speech. Hands off the Uhuru Fighting Coalition is launching a campaign to repeal the foreign agent laws. And so, of course, this is important, right? Anybody who's essentially speaking out against the American empire could be subject to similar prosecution, especially since they weren't actually convicted of conspiring with Russia. Merely, they were convicted of conspiring to conspire with Russia. And that is ultimately what they get no time for. But it's still troubling precedent set in this case. All right, next article here, this one from Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com. British Defense Minister says UK forces can be sent to Ukraine for training. So the British Defense Minister John Healey has suggested that the UK could send troops to Ukraine for a training mission. During a visit to Ukraine, Healey told The Times and the UK that the UK would work to improve its training of Ukrainian troops and wouldn't rule out sending trainers to Ukraine. He explained, "We need to make it easier for Ukrainians to access, and we need to work with the Ukrainians to help them motivate and mobilize recruits." When asked if that could involve sending troops to Ukraine, he said, "We will look wherever we can to respond to what the Ukrainians want. They are the ones fighting." Russia has repeatedly warned against Western countries sending troops to Ukraine for training purposes, saying any NATO soldiers would be legitimate targets of Russian military elites. The Russian military leads have revealed that British soldiers have been on the ground in Ukraine throughout the war, but they have been unofficial covert deployments. Earlier this year, a German military leak revealed that British soldiers are in Ukraine helping fire Storm Shadow missiles, which recently began striking targets inside the Russian mainland, marking a major escalation of the proxy war. The Discord leaks revealed in March of 2023 that 97 NATO special operating soldiers were inside Ukraine, including 50 British soldiers. In April of 2022, The Times reported that the British Special Air Service soldiers were in Ukraine training Ukrainians on anti-tank weapons. So this would be certainly a much larger deployment, but still very troubling and concerning. All right, next one here again, Dave DeCamp, Ukrainian intelligence. Oh, excuse me, wrong. All right, this is the correct article. Human Rights Watch, Israel is committing crimes of extermination and acts of genocide. So Human Rights Watch said in a report published on Thursday that Israel is committing crimes of extermination and acts of genocide by depriving the civilian population of Gaza of the necessary amount of water to survive. Human Rights Watch said in a press release that its 79-page report found that Israeli authorities have intentionally deprived Palestinians in Gaza of access to safe water for drinking and sanitation needs for basic human survival. Israeli authorities and forces cut off and later restricted piped water to Gaza, rendered most of Gaza's water and sanitation infrastructure useless by cutting electricity and restricting fuel, deliberately destroyed and damaged water and sanitation infrastructure and water repair materials, and blocked the entry of critical water supplies, the report found. It added that the restrictions on water have likely caused thousands of deaths. The report says doctors and nurses told Human Rights Watch that they have seen numerous infants, children, and adults die from a combination of malnutrition, dehydration, and disease. Human Rights Watch said it spoke with 66 Palestinians in Gaza who discussed the near impossibility of securing water for themselves and their families. So one father displaced in Rafah told the organization in December, "If we can't find drinkable water, we will drink seawater. It happened to me many times. I had to drink the seawater. You don't understand how much we are suffering." The report found that, on average, Palestinians live with 2 to 9 liters of water per day for their drinking, cooking, and personal washing needs, far below the 50 to 100 liters per day the World Health Organization says is a minimum that people need to meet their most basic needs. In protracted emergency situations, the WHO says a minimum of 15 liters of water per person per day for drinking and washing is needed. Human Rights Watch and Israeli authorities have Human Rights Watch said Israeli authorities have deliberately inflicted conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of part of the population in Gaza. By doing so, Israeli officials are responsible for the crimes against humanity of extermination and for acts of genocide. The report said this pattern of conduct, coupled with statements suggesting that some Israeli officials wish to destroy the Palestinians in Gaza, may amount to the crime of genocide. The Human Rights Watch report comes after Amnesty International released a 296-page report that concluded Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. The U.S. government, which is implicated in the Israeli crimes due to the huge amount of U.S. military aid given to Israel. Amnesty denied Amnesty's conclusion and said Thursday it disagreed with the Human Rights Watch report. So this is from State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel, and he explained when it comes to determination of something like genocide, the legal standard is incredibly high, and so finding in this scenario we just disagree with. And that's actually not extremely true. If you look at the international definition for genocide, I wouldn't consider it a high bar. I think what most people think of as a genocide when they think of that word is a fairly high bar, but that's not the international standard, and certainly not the one that the U.S. applied to, say, the Uyghurs in China when we accused China of committing a genocide against them. And so, this is just moving definitions and wordplay by the Americans to downplay what's happening here, but to deprive people of water, to limit them to like 2 liters of water per day is certainly an act meant to significantly reduce the population of that area. Another act that's intended to significantly reduce the population of Gaza is this: Haaretz. Israeli soldiers kill civilians and count them as terrorists. So Israeli soldiers stationed in the Nazarene corridor in the Gaza Strip regularly shoot and kill Palestinian civilians but count them as terrorists, Haaretz, an Israeli outlet, reported on Wednesday, citing testimony from Israeli commanders and other soldiers. The Nazarene corridor is a strip of land that separates northern Gaza from central and southern Gaza, where Israeli troops have demolished virtually every building and established military outpost. The Haaretz report says the IDF has a designated area, quote, kill zone, meaning any Palestinians who try to cross the line are shot and killed even if they're unarmed. So a commander in the IDF's Division 252 told Haaretz, the forces in the field call it the line of dead bodies. After shooting, the bodies are not collected, attracting pats of dogs who come and eat them. In Gaza, people know that whenever you see these dogs, that's where you must not go. Recently discharged Division 252 officer said, for the division, the kill zone extends as far as the sniper can see. We're killing civilians who are then counted as terrorists. The officer said that the Israeli units compete to see how many people they could kill. The IDF spokesman's announcement about casualty numbers have turned into a competition between units. If Division 99 kills 150 people, the next unit aims for 200. In one instance, Israeli troops massacred 200 Palestinians, and only 10 were confirmed as being known Hamas operatives, but the IDF announcement said that they were all militants. No one questions the public announcements about the killing 100 of militants, a Division 252 officer said. One officer, described as a veteran of Division 252, recounted a time when the unit killed a boy he estimated was only 16 years old. One time, guards spotted someone approaching from the south. We responded as if it was a large militant raid. We took positions and just opened fire. I'm talking about dozens of bullets, maybe more. For about a minute or two, we just kept shooting at the body. People around me were shooting and laughing, he said. The soldier said that when it became clear the boy was not a Hamas militant, the battalion commander still congratulated them for killing a terrorist and said that they hoped that they would kill more. When someone pointed out that he was unarmed and looked like a civilian, everyone shouted him down. The commander said, crossing that line is a terrorist, no exception, no civilians. Everyone's a terrorist. This deeply troubled me, the soldier explained. In another incident, a soldier described witnessing an unarmed Palestinian being shot by an Israeli tank, and only one survived. We put him in a cage set up near our outpost, stripped off his clothes, and left him there. Soldiers passing by spat on him. It was disgusting. Finally, a military interrogator came, questioned him briefly while holding a gun to his head, then ordered his release. The soldier explained. The soldier said that 3 unarmed Palestinians who were killed were buried by IDF bulldozers. I don't know if anyone remembers they're there, he explained. And this is something that I've talked about really likely contributing to the death count in Gaza being far, far higher than even the Gaza Health Ministry reports. Here are just 3 people, and I'm sure most Israeli soldiers are not going to Haaretz and talking to them about the war crimes that they witnessed in Gaza. And so this is three of many, many, many little graves around Gaza that we will never find. All these bodies that are being eaten by the dogs, who knows that they will ever be counted. And so, this is just as clear a marker of any that this is meant to be a genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. So this report is just the latest piece of evidence that Israeli soldiers on the ground in Gaza are purposely killing civilians. Earlier this year, a report from 972 magazine cited Israeli soldiers who detailed how Israeli soldiers routinely executed Palestinian civilians simply because they entered an area the military defined as a no-go zone. American doctors and nurses who have entered Gaza in a volunteer setting to do humanitarian work and things like that, have reported seeing many children with gunshot wounds to the head and chest. So 99 American healthcare workers said in an open letter to President Biden released in October, every one of us who worked in an emergency, intensive care or surgical setting treated preteen children who are shot in the head or chest on a regular or even daily basis. So, this story is just so disgusting. I hate reading it. I hate that my government's supporting it, and it's incredibly disturbing, but that is what our government is doing right now. Now, another thing our government is doing right now is not only backing a genocide of one group of Muslims in Gaza, at the same time, we're backing a group of jihadists take over Syria. So I wrote this one for the Institute on December 19th, American diplomat to meet with al-Qaeda affiliated al-Jawlani. So a top American diplomat in the Middle East is traveling to Damascus to meet with Mohammed Abu al-Jawlani. The troop is a sign that the U.S. may lift sanctions on the al-Qaeda-affiliated rebel group that deposed former Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. The Financial Times reported that President Joe Biden has deployed Barbara A. Leaf, Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, to Syria to meet with Jawlani. Jawlani is the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, and recently said he hopes Western countries will be willing to lift sanctions on Syria and remove HTS from the foreign terrorist organizations list. British diplomats met with Jawlani earlier this week. The meeting came as Jawlani continues to have a $10 million bounty from the State Department for his capture. Following Assad's ouster, Biden heralded Assad's fall and Jawlani's rise as a fundamental act of justice. Politico explained that furious debate broke out in the White House on the issue of removing HTS's terrorism designation. Jawlani, who fought with al-Qaeda in Iraq during the Iraq War, has attempted to soften his image in recent years by giving friendly interviews to Western journalists, often appearing in a suit and with a trimmed beard to obscure his jihadist ideology. In one of his first addresses to the Syrian people, he declared the institutions of Sharia law, according to Israel National News. He said that the morality police should enforce Islamic law through education rather than force, but Jawlani noted that force was still an option, saying that the jihad is obligatory for this reason. So HTS was given the terror designation shortly after Jawlani founded the organization in 2017. The organization grew out of the al-Nusra Front, al-Qaeda's Syria affiliate. At the time, Washington and London recognized Jawlani's reorganization of his militant group was an effort to obscure its al-Qaeda origins. While Jawlani's embrace of bin Ladenite jihadism is concerning, as al-Qaeda-affiliated groups have plotted and executed multiple terrorist attacks on the United States, Washington and its regional allies have backed HTS against Assad over his long-standing ties to Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah. And this is one of the most frustrating policies that I have ever discussed on this show. This idea that we need to support al-Qaeda because al-Qaeda is somehow better to be in Damascus than Putin or the Ayatollah or Hezbollah is simply absurd. If you're looking at the security of the American people, the only true threat to us are these Jawlani jihadists that we should all be concerned about, but rather that's who our government is embracing simply because Israel prefers them to the Iranians, and so America adopted that policy as well. All right, so even aside from the Jolani issue in Syria, the U.S. has another major problem. And as we bat the Syrian Kurds for over a decade, telling them, we need you to fight ISIS for us. We're going to help you out. We're going to do all these wonderful things for the Syrian Kurds. And now we have our NATO ally Turkey invading Syria and maybe looking to expel the Syrian Kurds from quite a bit of their territory in Syria. So this one, Jason Ditz at antiwar.com. Turkey says U.S. State Department claims a ceasefire with Kurds are untrue, vows to continue the offensive. So last week, a 4-day ceasefire was reached between Turkey and the U.S.-backed Kurdish SDF to allow the SDF to withdraw from contested city of Manbij. That ceasefire expired on Monday, though the U.S. announced on Tuesday that it had reached a deal with Turkey to extend it through the end of the week. Given the amount of fighting on Wednesday, something didn't add up with the story. Turkish officials are now offering a clarification that there was never any extension of the ceasefire in the first place. They suggested that State Department spokesman Matthew Miller must have had a slip of the tongue to suggest otherwise. Now, again, America is the world empire. Washington is the capital of the world empire. Turkey is a member of NATO, right? Like, there should be a pecking order here where the American priorities are accepted by our allies in this region. We shouldn't have the Turks, the Israelis, HTS, who we just propped up, all defying what Washington is saying, but that's exactly what's happening here. What is even the point of having a $1.7 trillion military budget if every time all these countries that you lavish with weapons and security guarantees don't do what you ask, right? We are asking Turkey not to invade a separate sovereign country and attack the Syrian Kurds who, look, in fairness, are unfairly presented to the American people and in the West as some kind of enlightened Arab Muslims who we could all trust and support, right? The Kurds, just like other groups in the Middle East, all have their own problems and commit their own human rights abuses. It's not like, if we set up some independent Kurdistan in eastern Syria, that suddenly you're going to have, George Washington and the new United States of America centered right in former Syria in the Middle East. At the same time, we've made promises to the Kurds, and it shouldn't be that much to get our NATO ally Turkey to respect them, but yet the Biden administration can't do that. It's just simply unbelievable how weak the U.S. is in spite of this massive military budget, all the influence that Washington says it has and that it needs to control the world. It can't use the minimal amount of that to put pressure on our own allies to achieve an end that Washington wants. It's baffling. So back to the article here. On top of that, Turkish military officials said it was out of the question for Turkey to have talks with the SDF because they consider them a terrorist organization. Funny. Ankara says that there's a terrorist organization that they don't meet with. The U.S. says we have a terrorist organization and we send our top diplomat for the Middle East to meet with them. That's curious. They further said that the offensive against the Kurds will continue until they are fully disarmed. That, it seems, explains why the fighting between Turkey and their allies in the Syrian National Army, the SNA, and the SDF never really stopped earlier this week. The SDF's Manbij Military Council and the SNA factions continue to clash around the city, and there have been reports of artillery strikes in the area from both sides. 21 Turkish-backed fighters were killed on Wednesday, and a number of SDF fighters as well, although the exact number was not disclosed. There are more casualties today, though again, the exact numbers are not available. At least 2 civilians, including a 5-year-old boy, have been killed in the fighting. Turkey has been providing air support for the SNA attacks on the Kurds, and Turkish drones have also carried out multiple attacks on targets in the city of Kobani. Those attacks include a strike on the Kobani foreign minister on Kobani FM, a Kurdish-run radio station. The SDF issued a statement on Thursday accusing Turkey and their mercenaries of escalating their offensive. They said they repelled the attack around the Tusharim Dam south of Kobani, but that the Turkish reinforcements are still incoming. The statement also called on the global community to take a firmer stance against the Turkish escalation and called on the civilians in Kobani to take up arms to defend against the Turkish forces. They said taking the region would be no picnic for the invading force. This is shaping up to be potentially a major issue. Some in Israel are keen to bat the SDF to prevent Turkey from having too much influence in post-Assad Syria. The U.S. is also a close ally with the SDF, though President Trump notably abandoned support for the SDF in 2019 when Turkey was launching separate offensive against them and took a little bit of Syrian territory. It wasn't as much as Turkey is looking to take now. Now, interestingly enough, the U.S. apparently has a bunch of troops in this area and actually quite a few more troops than they ever told the American people. Pentagon reveals the U.S. has more than twice the number of troops in Syria than previously disclosed. So on Thursday, the Pentagon revealed that the U.S. has roughly 2,000 troops occupying Syria, more than twice the number it has disclosed. For years, the U.S. says it has about 900 troops inside Syria. Pentagon spokesman Major General Pat Ryder said the troop levels have been at 2,000 for a while, well before the regime change that ousted former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Since the regime change in Syria on December 8th, the Pentagon has been asked repeatedly about the number of U.S. troops in the country and kept repeating the number 900. Ryder claimed that he had just learned it was significantly higher than he had been saying. As you know, we have been briefing you regularly that there are approximately 900 U.S. troops deployed to Syria. In light of the situation in Syria and significant interest, we recently learned that those numbers were higher, and so asked to look into it. I learned today that, in fact, there are approximately 2,000 U.S. troops in Syria, and who knows, the number could be higher. He could just be lying again. No reason to listen to what this spokesman says, other than to take the 2,000 number as a minimum, not a maximum. So Ryder claimed that the additional forces are on more temporary deployments while the 900 in Syria are on a long-term basis. He said, as I understand it, and as it was explained to me, these additional forces are considered temporary rotational forces that deployed to meet shifting mission requirements, whereas the core 900 are on a longer-term deployment. And I'm sure it's, Group A is there temporarily for 3 months, then Group B comes in temporarily for 3 months, and then, Group A comes back for 3 more months. And so that way, it's a temporary deployment, right? You could kind of pull that off with that kind of logic. All right, so 2 more stories before we wrap up here on today's show. This next one goes into what the U.S. knew about the HTS offensive before it happened. So this from Day to Camp. The U.S. had foreknowledge of the offensive led by al-Qaeda-linked Tahrir al-Sham that ousted former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and helped another rebel group join the fight, the Telegraph reported on Wednesday. The report said that the U.S. notified Revolutionary Command Radio, RCA, a U.S.-funded militia based out of the U.S. at al-Tanaf in southern Syria, to be ready for an attack that could lead to the end of Assad's rule. They did not tell us how it would happen, an RCA commander said. We were just told everything is about to change. This is your moment. Either Assad will fall or you will fall. But they did not say when or where. They just told us to be ready. In October, the U.S. brought several other Sunni Muslim militias under the command of the RCA, swelling the force from 800 fighters to about 3,000. All the fighters are armed by the U.S., and the U.S. pays their salaries of $400 a month. The U.S. also backs the Kurdish SDF in eastern Syria, but the RCA is a separate force. When HTS-led forces began its offensive from Syria in northwest Idlib province and advanced southward towards Damascus, the RCA headed north. According to the Telegraph, the U.S.-funded group now controls about 1/5 of Syria's territory. The commander spoke to the paper of a former Syrian government airbase that was used by the Russians outside the city of Palmyra, and so the RCA has now captured that base. The commander said that the RCA and HTS were cooperating during the offensive and that the U.S. coordinated communication between the two groups from al-Tanaf. The U.S. has celebrated the overthrow of Assad and made it clear it's willing to work with HTS, despite the fact that the group is an offshoot of al-Qaeda and designated by the State Department as a foreign terrorist organization. The Telegraph reports made clear that the U.S. was aware of the planned HTS offensive. RCA members said the U.S. told them about the opportunity to overthrow Assad in early November, about 3 weeks before the offensive started. And it's interesting that at this time, Amos Hochstein, the Israeli American who is Biden's energy envoy, but has been effectively acting as Biden's top diplomat to the Middle East, has been saying that there were historic changes about to come to the Middle East around that time. And so one wonders if that's what they were talking about. All right, wrapping up today's show with a story from Yemen. Series of Israeli airstrikes in Yemen kill at least 9 people. So on Thursday morning, dozens of Israeli warplanes launched a series of airstrikes against Yemeni ports in Yemen's capital of Sana'a, which came after the Houthis fired a missile at Israel. According to Yemeni media, 7 people were killed by Israeli strikes on the port of Al-Saf, and 2 people were killed by strikes on the Ras Asa oil facility. Both the port and the oil facility are located in the province of Hadida, which is located on the Red Sea. Israeli strikes were reported in the city of Hadida, and 2 power plants were hit in Sana'a. According to a statement from the Yemeni Workers Union Federation, the Yemenis killed by the strikes were workers. According to Yemen's Saba news agency, the Federation said in a statement that Israel's targeting of 2 power plants in the capital of Sana'a led to the deprivation of thousands of families from electricity, while the attacks on the ports of Hadida and Saif and the Rasa Asa oil facility resulted in the deaths and injuries of a number of workers in those facilities. Houthi officials also said that the Israeli strikes hit civilian targets. Israel acknowledged that it targeted energy infrastructure, but claimed that was used for military purposes. The Israeli military said it conducted precision strikes against Houthi military targets in Yemen, including ports and energy infrastructure in Sana'a, which the Houthis have been using in ways that effectively contributed to military actions. The Israeli military said that the Houthi missiles fired at Israel was intercepted, but parts of the interceptor landed on the ground, and a chunk hit an elementary school building, causing it to collapse. No one was in the building at the time, and no injuries were reported. Houthi military spokesman claimed the Houthis fired 2 missiles at military sites in Israel. Attacks, he said, coincided with the Israeli strikes on Yemen. He said the missiles were launched in solidarity with the oppressed Palestinian people and in response to the massacres against our brothers in Gaza. As a part of the 5th phase of the support in our battle of the promised conquer and sacred jihad, and within the framework of responding to Israeli aggression against our country. Since last year, the Houthis have been launching attacks on Israeli-linked shipping and firing missiles and drones at Israel in response to the onslaught in Gaza. Thursday's airstrikes marked the 3rd time that Israel has bombed Yemen. In January this year, the U.S. began, of last year, so 2024, the U.S. began a new bombing campaign against the Houthis and launched hundreds of missiles and strikes on Yemen that had done nothing but to escalate this situation. The Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, started targeting American shipping in response and have expanded their attacks on Israel. According to the United Nations, the first war that was being waged against Yemen, that's the Saudi-UAE war, killed nearly 400,000 people, more than half of them dying due to starvation and disease. And so one wonders what the implications will be of Israel destroying their civilian infrastructure. All right, everybody, that's the show for today. Remember, next week, the schedule will be a little bit different with Christmas. I'm going to try to have out 5 shows in the podcast feed, at least 2 conflicts of interest, Monday and Friday, and then Kyle Anzalone shows in the middle. The first one would be a new one, and then the subsequent 2 may be repeats of some of the first shows that I recorded, just so you all can have a taste of the new program and see how much you like it. Really appreciate everybody tuning into the show. We'll be back with more next week.